Good afternoon and welcome to this new webinar from ERA, the European Union Agency for Railways. I'm Cyril Martin, Communication Officer, and I will be your moderator today. Have you ever tried to buy a single train ticket to travel across different European countries? Probably not. And even if you did, you would have realized that it's much easier to book a flight between two European capital cities than the same trip with a train. Why is that? Is a European-wide train ticketing possible? What are the constraints when, in the meantime, the European Green Pass has been issued in record time to face the COVID-19 context? To answer these questions and many others, we will today give you an overview of the current situation regarding train ticketing in Europe. After an introduction by ERA's Executive Director, Mr. Josef Doppelbauer, and a presentation by Stefan Jugelt, who works at the ERTMS and telematics unit here at ERA, we will have a roundtable with our three guest speakers, guests that I'm very honored to welcome and introduce. Ms. Delphine Gransart, Senior Researcher at EPF, the European Passengers Federation. The EPF is an association of passenger organizations and organizations promoting sustainable mobility committed to improving standards on public transport and long-distance international rail services in Europe. Mr. Nick Brooks, Secretary General of ORRail. ORRail is the Alliance of Passenger Rail New Entrants in Europe, represents independent passenger rail companies, both railway operators and ticket vendors. And Jan Semandi, Mr. Jan Semandi, Senior Advisor at CER, which is the Community of European Railway and Infrastructure Companies, representing around 70 railway undertakings and infrastructure managers. You, dear attendees, are most welcome to ask questions to our experts using the chat function, which you will find at the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can also tag questions from other attendees, which you judge valuable by clicking the thumb icon. A last word to say that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and our website in the coming days. May I now give the floor to Josef Doppelbauer, the Executive Director of ERA, for some opening remarks. We will have the pleasure to listen again to Josef at the end of the webinar for a conclusion. Please, Josef, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cyril, and also from my side, a very warm welcome to this webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 2021 is the European Year of Rail. This European Year of Rail should be the opportunity to create awareness for the contribution of rail to clean mobility. However, rail's overall share of the various modes of transport has become relatively low. In Europe, overall, it's below 10%. Railways do not have a problem with decarbonization, but obviously a problem with attractiveness. The possibility to buy tickets for the desired international rail journey certainly is a major contributor to the attractiveness, or in other words, if you already have difficulties in buying your ticket, this will make rail very unattractive. We know, and the COVID Green Pass has demonstrated, that technology would be there. What we are missing is cooperation and standardization. Therefore, I'm looking forward to the discussion this afternoon, to the discussion with our guests, representing passengers and operators, to the discussion with you over the chat, and I also hope that we will come up with some possible solutions. Let me wish you an interesting webinar, and I now hand over to Stefan Jugelt for giving us his presentation. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Doppelbauer, and for your introduction, and welcome and good afternoon to all of you. I would like to discuss with you and our speakers about the challenges for an interoperable rail ticket. But before we do so, I would like to come back to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected our lives in the last months quite heavily. Now we know the vaccination campaign is ongoing, and one of the measures to exchange information about the vaccination state of the travelers within EU is the so-called EU Green Pass, an interoperable barcode containing the vaccination state of everybody which has received a vaccination or has undergone a test. When we were looking into the summer, the Green Pass allowed us to enjoy festivals, concerts, to visit museums, and to travel around by plane and by train in Europe. And this in all EU member states and even beyond. As you can see here on the map, we have now much more countries than only the EU member states, which have accepted now this pass and where you can travel with this pass freely, including countries like Morocco, Panama, or Israel, which are even not in Europe. Coming back to the certificate, to obtain the certificate, it was quite easy. Once you have received a vaccination or undergone a test, you have received the certificate without a hassle. The rules for the usage of this Green Pass in Europe were standardized everywhere. When you had such a pass, you were aware what kind of rules are applied for. The certificate was interoperable, or is interoperable. It's accepted everywhere based on a standard, based on an open standard, which is publicly available on the website of the EU. And the checking of the certificate by third parties is quite easy because the software is available for free in all app stores for the applications. And this makes the traveling this summer quite easy. Coming back to the train tickets and coming back to the traveling by train in Europe, which has been already raised as question from Mr. Doppelbauer, could you imagine that such an interoperable ticket like the COVID-19 pass would be available as well in all EU member states and in the European Free Trade Association, for instance? And the ticket could be purchased for all journeys and all passengers on a so-called, let's say, Skyscanner for rail, means an interface, means a website where you can see all offers from the railway undertakings and bus operators, for instance, using the best option for the passengers. All applicable rules for the ticket means, for instance, if you have accompanying persons, if you would like to take your bike with you, and what are the constraints and restrictions for the application of the passenger rights are clearly explained, unambiguous, and in all languages which are needed by the passenger. Furthermore, can you imagine such a ticket could be used for all railway undertakings within the EU and as well in a multimodal environment, for instance, for the last mile when you take a local bus or a local tram? A ticket which is available on smartphones or as well on paper if you prefer to keep a paper ticket with you. And a ticket which allows as well to undergo checks by all actors like railway undertakings or bus operators offering transport services. We would like to discuss with you today if this is a dream for 2030 or if the COVID-19 certificate and the fast implementation in Europe has shown that even a European-wide implementation of such a tool is possible and what rail can do to have a similar experience for the travelers. How this ticketing is linked to the overall strategy of the European Union, to the overall strategy called Green Deal. Maybe most of you have heard already about the statements from the European Commission to have for Europe a so-called Green Deal, take into account the greenhouse gas emissions and to lower them by 2030 by 55% compared with 1990. And it was confirmed again yesterday in the speech of Ms. von der Leyen that this is a clear goal of the European Commission. And here, transport, public transport, and as well the multimodality plays an important role for this, because it's one of the parts which have to be implemented to achieve this goal, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And here you can see in these 5 points that one point we have to cover here is the multimodality, and this goal has been set out by the European Commission to make public transport more attractive in EU. And railways are the backbone of the multimodal mobility and for the multimodal transport system, because they cover long distances, they cover as well urban services. So rail ticketing is then one of the key parts which have to be interoperable and has to be implemented in such a way that it facilitates the multimodal transport. How this is linked in detail with the Green Deal strategy of the EU, and the European Commission has created a plan for the green, smart and affordable mobility, providing here a more detailed description of the multimodal offer. And here you can see clear statements concerning the smart mobility, the so-called smart mobility, how to achieve seamless, safe and efficient connectivity by a seamless multimodal transport based on digital solutions, and to unleash the full potential of data. And linked with these statements is the so-called flagship action to making a connected and automated multimodal mobility a reality by a clear statement, make it possible for passengers to buy tickets for multimodal journeys and to switch seamlessly between transport modes. The same holds as well for freight, but this is for today not in the scope of our discussion. Coming back to the role what the European Union Agency for Railway plays in this game, I would like to explain you briefly in one slide what is our contribution, what we are doing, how we are helping to implement these multimodal solutions, to give you a short overview what is our role in this implementation of multimodal transport solutions by the European Commission. We have a so-called standard for railway distribution in a technical specification for interoperability, which is called Telematics Applications for Passenger Services. This is a specification which is available for free on our website, including some accompanying technical documents describing in detail how to implement multimodal distribution for rail. And we have developed this specification and maintained this specification in a close cooperation with the European railway sector, with railway undertakings and as well so-called ticket vendors, means travel agencies selling at the end railway tickets, for instance. And these technical specifications cover a broad range of standards, how to fulfill the requirements for multimodal transport and to inform passengers, to create tickets, and also to allow some additional functions. And here I would like to start with the timetable data, which is standardized in this specification for telematics applications for passengers, where we describe in all details how data for timetable data have to be exchanged on European level for railway services, but of course as well with links to other transport modes. Means here we can exchange the data for timetables for railways, but as well provide the interfaces to other transport modes like a local transport system in a city or long distance coaches. Furthermore, we are speaking in this specification as well about a standardization of the exchange of railway tariff data. Means data you need to calculate at the end the price of a ticket, and also to decide who can sell this ticket, who has to receive which amount of the money you have collected once you have sold such a ticket. And this covers international tariffs, but as well we have a proposal on the table on our website how to cover as well all domestic railway tariffs with such a data exchange. Furthermore, we are speaking about the reservation of railway services. Means once you have decided which train you would like to take, you found an offer, we have standardized the way how to reserve here a seat or a sleeping car or a cushion if you would like to travel with those trains, and also to exchange here the information with those railway undertakings offering the service that this seat is now reserved and from which station to which station. And the system is already widely in place and allows you seat reservation at the end from Faro to Narvik. Means through Europe, you can reserve seats and couchettes, for instance, in a train, supported by the system. And then furthermore, we talk as well about ticketing. Means once you have reserved your ticket, of course, you need also a proof of this statement that you have reserved this ticket, and then you receive here a ticket which is based as well on standards which are maintained by the European Union Agency for Railways. So we are talking here about, for instance, about the layout for tickets on security paper, means the usual tickets you can buy at any train station. But we speak, of course, as well about new ticketing methods, like the ticket you can print out at home, which is secured by a barcode, or the layout for tickets which is based on a mobile phone. And this is a quite important part now, especially with the new ticketing methods, how to ensure the ticketing security with barcodes. Who has to participate here in this data exchange to show a barcode on your mobile phone and then to be accepted as traveler on a train? And here these standards describing as well how such a barcode is generated, what kind of data are accommodated within, and which security mechanisms have to be applied to ensure here that these electronic tickets are correct and cannot be copied for passengers which are not entitled to use them. And when it comes to the trip itself, we have standardized the data exchange as well to inform you as passenger about train delays in a station, in a train, that these data are correct, these data have a high quality, and you can rely on them once you receive such a delay message that your train is delayed. And a last point, which has been discussed already on several occasions here, you know, the rail passenger rights regulation are in place. They are now revised and in force since mid of June this year. And we have already prepared, or we are in the preparation also to allow you for an electronic submission of passenger complaints in the future. Means once you would have had a problem during your trip, means a delay, means a cancellation of a train. In the future, this should be possible as well, that you can submit electronically and not only on a paper form your complaint to the railway undertaking which has sold your ticket, for instance, and then receive your reimbursement according to the rail passenger rights regulation. These are the topics we are covering here within this technical specification for interoperability for the telematics application for passenger services. And this is, from our point of view, a good starting point now to hand over to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for this very interesting and clear overview. I'm now eager to listen to our guest speakers. And to start with, I'd like to go to you, Delphine. I just recall our audience that you are a senior researcher at the European Passengers Federation. Well, actually, my first question is, okay, in its smart mobility strategy, the European Commission stated that the planning and purchasing tickets for multimodal journeys is cumbersome. The Commission has set out those goals like by 2030, seamless multimodal passenger transport will be facilitated by integrated electronic ticketing, and freight transport will be paperless. And cross-border tickets should become easier to use and to buy. Starting in 2021, the Commission will propose regulatory measures to enable innovative and flexible tickets that combine various transport modes and give passengers true options for door-to-door travel. So now I come to my question. Is this a dream, or can it become reality in 2030, which is less than 10 years? Delphine, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Cyril, for inviting me and introducing me. So indeed, I work for EPF, the European Passengers Federation. So we are actually an umbrella of passenger organizations across Europe, and representing the passenger views at EU level and covering really all modes. So not only rail, but also air, bus and coach, maritime, and even urban transport, because as we all know, actually traveling is a door-to-door experience in the end. So this is why the topic of today, having multimodal information and ticketing, is also really important to us. And yeah, looking at rail, indeed, we need to make rail more attractive in order to achieve the Green Deal's objectives, as mentioned in the introduction today. And in our perspective, to achieve this, to achieve a more modal shift to rail, we think it's essential that a more user-centered perspective should be adopted. So what are passengers' priorities when they want to travel, and specifically related to rail? Of course, there are several, but this webinar now focuses on one of them, and that is information and ticketing. And indeed, I can confirm that today travel planning and shopping, especially across modes and across borders, is not always easy. On the contrary, it's often quite difficult, it's risky, it's time consuming, because if you travel using different operators and across borders, you often as a passenger need to visit several websites, compare offers and prices and so on. And also book the legs of your trip separately. So this is a problem. So this is why, as EPF, we really support all the initiatives that are being undertaken right now to facilitate EU-wide information and ticketing, multimodal, because we feel this is really would contribute to passengers being able to make a more informed and sustainable choice in an integrated transport system. So if users have access to reliable, comprehensive and transparent information about all the transport options that are available, and if there's an easy and affordable way to buy tickets, preferably through tickets, which I am sure will come up in the discussion that follows, then indeed we would really be in favor of this, because it would really stimulate a shift towards more sustainable and multimodal mobility. So now coming to your question, Cyril, can this become a reality? And we believe yes, but of course some action is still needed. As Stefan pointed out, there are already a number of technical solutions available. Of course, we need technical solutions like open standards, we need interoperability, to ensure scalability, economies of scale, also roaming across borders, and for seamless traveling in general. But for the most part, technology is not really the main issue in our perspective. There's also other things that matter, like access to data and cooperation among all the stakeholders in the transport ecosystem. So regarding access to data, this would include data on timetables, obviously, but also on fares if we want to also have integrated ticketing. So data is really an enabler for creating multimodal integrated information, ticketing and payment. And across the EU, different approaches exist to open data. So we do feel that regulation at EU level to regulate data accessibility is recommended. And from the user perspective, we also want to point out that there are possibly some privacy and security concerns that need to be addressed as well. And regarding cooperation, it's worth mentioning that EPF, together with all the main stakeholders actually in the railway ecosystem, has been working hard in the context of the International Rail Passenger Transport Platform. So it's really giving us a lot of hope that all the important actors have really joined forces and have committed together to have a joint action plan on how to make rail more attractive. It does also achieve the Green Deal objectives. And among those priorities in the action plan, improvements to the availability and online distribution of tickets, travel information, onboard services, and better support during disruptions are all mentioned. So this is really a good step forward in our view. That's my main points. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Delphine. Basically, I would like to ask the same question now to Nick, Nick Brooks from All Rail, Secretary General of All Rail. For you, is it a dream, this complete and comprehensive tickets in less than 10 years or not? Please, Nick, the floor is yours. Are you with us, Nick? Because we cannot hear you. Can you hear us? Okay, so maybe
I am here now. Sorry,
you are here. Perfect.
I had a technical issue. So if you can hear me now, I will start. Thanks very much for inviting us today. I'm Nick Brooks from All Rail. And to answer your question in one sentence, maybe. But first of all, the Commissioner is right. It is still cumbersome, these through tickets across borders. It isn't working. It shouldn't just become easier. It should simply be easy for everyone and not just train experts like the people taking part in this seminar today. And ultimately, I think everybody here probably agrees that door-to-door multimodal journeys can be put together with rail as the backbone. That's what Stefan Hugert said. With the first and last mile by other collective transport modes, that's the kind of future that we should be aiming for, because that's the only thing that will rival the convenience of the private individual motor car, which is our biggest competitor as the rail sector. And that will hopefully achieve real modal shift. Certainly we at All Rail believe that. And it's critical to have this in place by 2030, because, I mean, the EU Commission has strong carbon emission targets. I think it's 55% reduction versus 1990 by then. But can it become reality? And we think that depends on three things. Number one is, firstly, these multimodal platforms, these sky scanners of ground transportation that will make it possible to give impartial, transparent access to passengers, and ultimately it's all about passengers. They, either independent ticket vendors or in-house ticket vendors or railway operators, they need to get the access to the data. That's what Delphine already alluded to. Secondly, if they are to be these multimodal platforms, they need the right to sell tickets and integrate them into a travel chain on fair and reasonable commercial terms. That means versus the in-house ticket vendors of the market dominant rail operators. Otherwise, preferential access to data and better financial terms, if that is only for the in-house ticket vendors of the market dominant companies, people will keep returning to those kind of platforms, for example, to get the best fare, and fragmentation will continue. So if we want sky scanners, we want them to have the best quality, impartial, transparent information for the benefit of passengers. There needs to be open data and there needs to be fair commercial terms. Otherwise, we fear the downstream rail ticket market will remain distorted for the long term. And then thirdly is the passenger rights issue. We need passenger rights, safe, secure, reliable, mandatory passenger rights for the entire travel chain. It needs to be mandatory and it needs to be much more widely available. Whatever is in a booking engine or on a platform or on an online or offline table, whatever connections are shown, as long as they have a viable minimum connection time, then there must be passenger rights coverage from the beginning until the end of the entire journey, with missed connection protection and delay compensation as well. That's part of EU passenger rights. But then in that case, it would be totally logical that delay compensation should be paid by whatever entity causes a delay in order to improve performance in the future. And we think that only this kind of system will grow the attractiveness of the entire rail and multimodal ground transportation system from door to door. And furthermore, we think it will be a win-win for all participants in the sector, not just in the rail sector, but across public transport. And while it's preferable that this comes through a sector initiative, such as the International Rail Passenger Platform, in order to avoid regulation, with a heavy heart, we think that this can't be done. We think there needs to be some regulation, so we are welcoming it from the EU Commission in the future. Otherwise, it simply won't happen. And the goals of the EU Green Deal will be missed. I mean, climate change is a race against time. So we need to get this kind of system, reliable through tickets, reliable, impartial bookings, in place as soon as possible, and not in 2030, but sooner than that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. Now I'd like to go to CER, and please, Jan, you're the senior advisor there, and yeah, I'd like to hear you now on that, please.
Thank you, Cyril, and thank you all for inviting us and to attend this webinar. I think it's clear we all agree on the vision. By 2030, we should see an integrated and multimodal e-ticketing in Europe. And here, CR representing the European railway and infrastructure companies in Europe, but also their national association, as well as infrastructure managers and vehicle leasing companies. Here it's important to repeat that we share this vision, and then it must become a reality for the benefit of the passengers. At least I think it was clearly said by Delphine and EPF earlier. And also I would like to pick up on the presentation made by Stefan and the agency earlier. As I see here some divergence with my colleague about the EU legal background we are evolving in. Stefan clearly explained that the EU regulation is in place. And I'm here referring maybe to the 2022 package where which will integrate much more than we have today, which will answer, I'm sure, all the questions we will ask today. I think we'll go through this detail. Delphine mentioned timetables, fares, and the need for more EU regulation. Nick mentioned the need for multimodal platform, right, to sell ticket in a fair manner. I think we can go through this today and see that the EU regulation is in place or will be in place by 2022. So when asking the question, is it a dream for 2030? The answer must be yes, for two reasons. First, we have the EU legal background in place, and secondly, operators are committed to implement such a vision. Today, that's true. There is much to do. Delphine underlines this pretty much. We can look at connection, which works, which does not work today. We talk about true ticketing and so on, but there is much to do. The important thing is that implementation for whichever transport undertaking is a real investment. And then when we look at such investment, we should look from a customer perspective, that it's an investment which is required by the railways and the public authorities to develop rail market share. So it's not only a responsibility of the operators to invest in such development. Another point about investing is that such a commitment to invest is only possible and will be only sufficient, providing that there is sufficient support to ensure a level playing field between transport mode. We can quote, for instance, VAT, we can quote fuel taxes, comparing with the air industry, for instance. And all this should be in place to ensure a current approach of a fair market shares between transport mode. What are we doing as operators to ensure such vision is implemented? We are quite active on the subject, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to go through this, and the agency can also demonstrate the great commitment of the EU institution to go forward with that, with the support of the railway operators and infrastructure managers. So yeah, quite a positive answer to this vision. The answer is yes, and more than yes, it must be yes in the future, given sufficient funding, of course.
Well, many thanks, Jan. You were referring a few seconds ago about the legal framework, and that we are receiving lots of questions and comments in the chat, and we would like to thank very much our audience for that. There is a comment saying that, okay, it's easy to imagine, but hard to do unless an API is enforced by law, like the mandatory CSI reporting. What do you think about that? Maybe Delphine? Do you have any reaction to that? Is this something that is feasible, according to you?
Yeah, well, actually, we do think that the provision of data is really a crucial enabler to achieve all this. So in order to combine also offers, so in that sense, I think maybe yes, it could be a good idea to oblige. Wait, I'm just have an issue here. So, but what the question is, what kind of data indeed should be shared? So the timetable is one thing, but also the fares indeed, because for users it's necessary to also have the correct fares and to compare them, and it should actually also include, for example, promotions for seniors, for young people, etc. So yes, from our part, I think it would be a good idea, but of course the governance of this data is something that needs to be discussed, and there should indeed be fair and reasonable commercial terms. So this is something that we need to to agree with all the partners here. I would also like to hear their views on this from my side.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone want to react on what has just been said? Maybe Nick, do you have a view on that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Wonderful. I mean, ultimately, across Europe, we're still in quite a lopsided market. And where there is competition on the tracks between different operators, you see a similar kind of effect as already in aviation, that different operators are willing to share data voluntarily. I mean, look at Italy, where you've got very successful competition on the tracks between two different operators, and there's not a data sharing problem there. So that indicates it can be done without legislation or regulation or whatever. However, we're not there yet across Europe. And as long as that's not the case, which is still in the vast majority of cases across Europe, probably in order to achieve what we're wanting here, what we're wanting to achieve by 2030, we'll need some kind of obligation, because otherwise, as we've seen in the past, it often doesn't happen. So if you want it, I'm afraid we need some corrective action until the market has reached the same kind of levels as in aviation or in other sectors where there is healthy competition. Within the intramodal competition, then I think data obligations won't be needed anymore.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nick. Jan from CER, there's a question in the chat that I would like to ask you: how to ensure that other transport mode operators and authorities responsible for public transport, PSO, are aware about these incentives? This is something broader, writes this attendee, than TAP and TSI scope. Is it necessary somehow to avoid development of national single ticketing systems, or to ensure that such systems are harmonized? Jan.
Thank you, Cyril, for this question. As I said earlier, the EU legislation to answer this question is in place. The EU background is in place. As Nick explained, there is a famous now example in Italy where it works. It actually works. And when it comes to the awareness of public transport authorities to put PSOs in place to ensure such process is working, then we cannot avoid to say that the public transport authorities should be aware of the EU legal background which is in place when setting up source contracts. That being said, I would like to come back on the question before and to Delphine call to see what would be the vision of transport operators. It is the fact that legal background is in place. We have the technical means to implement what is expected by the passengers. This is what was said again by Joseph in its opening speech. Technical means are there. So when it comes to having one single barcode, for instance, to identify all tickets as once, I think this was the idea behind the first question. I would like just to mention that it's actually it will actually be implemented into the 2022 TAP TSI legal text, where there will be one single way, one single technical mean to display for a passenger to show his ticket to any staff on board a train all over Europe. So yes, the technical means are in place, the EU legislation is in place, it's only now up to implementation, and I'm sure we will come to that topic later.
Yes, I have to add here from the point of view of ERA, of course, some statements, and I can confirm what Jan has said about the legal basis. Yes, the legal basis is there. And for rail, we have explained already what is within, and we are currently revising this legislation, and all these features which have been mentioned by Jan recently will be in the new revision foreseen to be published next year. For the other transport modes and the awareness of the local authorities about the rules for this, there's a similar regulation in place, regulation for the multimodal journey planner data from 2017, where as well public transport operators not operating rail, including also the road administration entities, are as well obliged to provide some data on so-called national access points where those data should be made available side by side with those data from public transport operators and from rail operators. So the standards are there, implementation is ongoing, but this will take time, and of course, maybe is not available already in all member states, but here as well, for other transport modes, the implementation is ongoing. So from the European standardization and from the European legislation, the rules and the texts are already in place.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much. Now I have a question. I would like to ask Delphine Gransart from EPF. Looking to the past, 30 years ago, it was possible to obtain a ticket counter at many train stations with the help of a printed timetable and a printed ticketing manual, a handwritten printed international ticket. Those tickets could be obtained for many of today's European member states, for example, for most of non-reservation national and international trains. Is the ticket purchase with new technologies, for example, of course, internet and smartphone, easier today, according to you? Please, Delphine.
Yes, well, the answer is a bit like it depends, because for some journeys, if they are available through smartphone or internet, it can be easier than before, but for others, it's more difficult. And sometimes the common problems are that tickets are not always available online, or they are sold by only one or a few railway undertakers, and yeah, or the fares are different and so on. But like I mentioned already, often now it is the case if you want to book a journey involving several operators, that often you have to visit several websites. So it's not really that easy. It could be, but it's in reality, it sometimes is not. And so one-stop shop functionality would really be a great advantage. So not having to visit all these different sites, it saves time, but also sometimes money, and it's also more convenient. And then in addition, what we would also like to see more is true ticketing. So meaning that if you buy tickets that involve several operators, that there is a guaranteed arrival at the final destination. Because right now each operator is responsible mainly for their own leg of the journey. But what if you combine several of them? Then as a passenger, obviously, you want to still arrive at your final destination. So this is also a point of improvement. And then also regarding the digital versus the live purchase, it should be noted that digital mobility solutions, of course, has a lot of potential, but we need to also pay attention to the needs of people who are who have a disability or have not this amount of digital literacy. So, well, they need to be accessible, such solutions, and user-friendly, so that also people with a disability, elderly people, people with limited digital skills are able to use them. And so in general, not only for them, but actually for all users, we need really a simple, intuitive, smart interface. And we should also keep some alternatives for people who are really not able to use these digital tools. And then related to, if I may just add a little more feedback on the previous question about the data sharing, because I would like to add something. the willingness to share data, by the way, this also includes data on accessibility, speaking of which, it does need to be addressed, because if we only rely on voluntary initiatives, it doesn't seem to be going that fast. So if we want to speed it up, then it does need to be addressed. But I think it's important that to note that the sharing of data should really be not a one-way street. So, I mean, the transport operators are now in the revised rail passenger rights regulation also obliged to share their data with other stakeholders and also ticket vendors. But on the other hand, for example, also public authorities and other operators should also be aware of this. And so, because this data is also important to influence public policy, knowing which routes are more popular, where investments are needed, and so on. So it really should be a win-win situation, so that in the end, the users and society as a whole can benefit from it.
Well, many thanks, Delphine. I'm afraid time flies, and I will now go to my last question for Nick. Nick, do you think there is an interest, and if yes, what are the key challenges to establish a kind of sky scanner for rail, offering the full range of rails that rails offers in the European Union? Please, Nick. Can you hear us? Because I know you have some problem with your...
Yes, I do have problems with the...
We can hear you. We can hear you. It's perfect.
Good,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I got a few microphone issues this afternoon. Firstly, and this must be stressed, there are already sky scanners for rail. They already exist. There are 8 such, we think we've counted up to 8 such European entrepreneurial companies that have done this from the private sector, that have invested in this, and they intend to fulfill this role. However, at the same time, we've also seen how last year one of them that invested over 100 million of private investment into the company from A to B failed, regrettably. So what's wrong? What are the key challenges? As I mentioned earlier, firstly, access to data, but we talked about that probably enough already, but also the fair and non-discriminatory commercial terms, so that they can have a chance at breaking even and turning a profit. That's perfectly reasonable in the European single market. But there's also one other thing, and that is the fact that the sky scanner in the aviation sector, if you go for the sky scanner and you put in one departure point, one destination in Europe, generally speaking, in most cases, there will be a point-to-point flight. It is available. Maybe in 10% of cases there isn't one, but in a vast majority, there'll be at least one point-to-point. You don't necessarily have to change. Whereas in the rail sector, in the European cross-border EU rail sector, long-distance rail sector, generally speaking, you do need to change quite a lot. There are not that many point-to-point services, perhaps one country to the next country. But let me give you some examples. Paris to Bologna, or Brussels to Barcelona, you need to change. And so ultimately, you need the network. The network is much more important in railways than it is in aviation. So anything that is shown on this sky scanner, anything that is made accessible to passengers, and of course the passengers are the top priority here, that they can access and book things, then it needs to show these changing options as well. And they need to be bookable, they need to be safe with passenger rights coverage, and they need to include new entrant operators too. It can't just be the case that this network benefit stays with the state incumbents that essentially inherited their networks from the taxpayer from their previous role as a historical railway operator. We need to make sure that a network, that new entrant operators can be part of a network as well, that there's a network effect across all operators. That's why we call for mandatory through ticketing. And these options, these travel trains where you change once or twice to get between any 2 railway stations in Europe, they need to be there, they need to be shown. Because if it's just the point-to-point options, then the sky scanner for rail really won't be very effective, and it won't help achieve modal shift across borders.
Thank you very much, Nick. Last question for you, Jan. But then who will ensure if we then now have this rail sky scanner, how do we ensure that the results will be shown on and displayed on an unbiased way to the customer?
Yes, thank you, Cyril. Again, it's clear. It is important to underline, as Nick said, there is such a sky scanner tool for rail existing. I'm happy that we are able to count 8 already of them. So the point is not how they can be set up, they are already existing. Then when it comes to the point how to ensure they are displaying in a fair manner the offers available, then we can look first at what already exists, because there is such tool existing. This is the first point. But we should also acknowledge that a single fare for a journey between different modes of transport, because this is what we are talking about when it is about multimodality, but also between different operators, from one operator to another, to ensure that there is a connection, a B2B connection, combining 2 different journey in one single ticket, what we call true ticket, for instance. It needs to be acknowledged that it comprises some complex but very relevant business aspect. And thus, it needs to be acknowledged that we need to look at the commercial environment associated to such journey. For instance, when addressing the issue related to the revenues from integrated ticketings, there is a need for commercial agreement, ensuring fair and commonly agreed share of distribution of costs, of commission fees, and of revenues. This is something which is too much forgotten. So, of course, this is not an issue for the passengers. This is very clear. The passenger shall not suffer from such issues, but this is something which is we need to keep in mind. And these all these costs need to be shared between the operators, for sure, the ticket vendors. This is also important to consider, but also those transport authority which are responsible for issuing these tickets. And as a matter of fact, the best way, and actually the only way to achieve such a framework in a fair and negotiated manner is a negotiated commercial agreement for the benefit of all parties. So this is how I would see such thing to be feasible on such platform. And with this, I would like to complement the environmental aspect of such ticket. So then how to classify those offers on a website, and this is for the aspect related to the passenger. Then we have a clear answer to that. We should promote rail as a sustainable mode of transport. I think this is what we can all agree on, and this is also something which was underlined in the introductory speech. So thank you for this question again, Cyril.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thanks to all of you. The clock is unfortunately ticking, and it's now time to conclude. Before giving the floor to our executive director for a final word, I would like to thank you very warmly, our speakers, for their good contribution and their participation today. It was a real pleasure to have you with us. Just a word for our very active audience today. Well, first to thank you for all your questions and your comments. Very interesting. Just want to tell you that all your questions, all the questions from the chat that have not been answered today will be answered later on, and the answers will be published on the ERA website. So now I'm very happy to give the floor to Josef Doppelbauer, the Executive Director of ERA, for a conclusion. Please, Josef.
Many thanks, Cyril, and many thanks again to the panelists. We have discussed an important aspect, and in the discussion, of course, we have gone deeply into the technical and the regulatory details. But first and foremost, it is a discussion about the user perspective. The ticketing is a very important aspect, as we said, for the attractiveness of rail, and attractiveness is always related to simplicity. It's a question of accessibility. We need also, in conjunction with this harmonized ticketing, the accurate and timely information, and we need the protection of the passengers in case of any problems or the need for rescheduling. Now, the harmonized European rail pass is a vision in order to have an interoperable rail ticket in Europe. But as we heard from the discussion, it is not just the rail ticket, it should be a multimodal ticket that includes the last mile in order to make connected and automated multimodal mobility a reality. We discussed some of the preconditions. We discussed the aspects of the distribution of cost. We discussed the aspect of the format, whether it's an electronic ticket, whether it's a printed home ticket. We also discussed the economies of scale and first and foremost also the access to data. When we speak about standardization, and also from the discussion today, it transpired, there is always the dilemma between how far can voluntary cooperation go and how far do we need regulation in order to enforce both cooperation and standardization. Unfortunately, in rail, we are still very fragmented. We are fragmented organizationally, and we are also fragmented in our mindset. When I look at some comments in the chat, we have a clear indication that only competition in rail will help to share best practices. I myself have the experience why in some countries you need a mandatory seat reservation, and even when you catch an earlier train and the carriage is empty, you hear, "Vous n'avez pas un ticket valable." So we need to start sharing best practices in order to make rail really attractive. Now, 10 years. And to be honest with you, I'm very disappointed that the panel has more or less accepted 10 years or even said maybe 10 years. If the green pass for COVID could be done in a few months, why the hell would we need 10 years to agree at least on a common format for ticketing? So it is, for me, another example why rail is not really fit for competition. It simply takes too long to implement the most simple things. In my view, we need to start progressing in feasible steps and try to do the most important steps first. Stefan has announced that with the next regulation package in 2022, we'll have the single barcode, we will have the standardization of the approach, and we need to start with the low-hanging fruits in order to make the European harmonized rail pass a reality, and this reality should be much earlier than 2030. I believe if we really work together, if we cooperate, and if we show the positive will, we should be there much sooner. And with that, I thank all participants to this webinar, and I hand back to Cyril for the final closing of this webinar today. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and I can only confirm your French experience in railways. We are now reaching the end of this webinar. Many thanks to all of you. Before you go, we would be very happy to receive your feedback on this webinar via the link provided on the webinar webpage on the ERA website, or, and this is new, via the QR code. Now, I'm sure you all know how to use a QR code. The QR code you're seeing right now on the screen and that you can flash with your smartphone. We look forward to meeting you again at our upcoming webinar on the 28th of October on the European data on rails. That will be another subject. If you would like to stay updated on our activities, please sign into our database by selecting the button my ERA profile on our webpage. Thank you very much again to all our speakers and for participating. Very active audience today. Very nice. Thank you very much. We wish you a very pleasant evening and take care.